The Cheers to That podcast, proudly brought to you by drinklab.org. Thanks for listening. Your next favorite cocktail is waiting at drinklab.org.
Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive. Today, we're going to tackle a bit of a, well, let's just say is a colorful one. We're diving into the wet pussy shot.
Definitely a drink with a name that gets your attention.
No kidding. I mean, come on, you hear that name and you got to laugh, right? But, and this is what we're here for, there's actually a surprising amount to unpack here.
Absolutely. It's more than just a silly name.
Right. So we're going to dig into the history of the wet pussy, figure out why it's so popular, especially in certain corners of the globe, and try to make sense of the recipe. Or should I say recipes?
Yeah, good luck penning that one down.
Seriously. But, okay, before we get into that whole mess, let's talk about the drink's, shall we say, cultural impact. I mean, the Drink Lab recipe even mentions it's big in Australia and a staple in U.S. college bars.
Right, it's got that rite of passage vibe to it in some places.
Totally. But why this shot? With this name, you'd think it'd be relegated to, like, bachelorette parties and that's it. Why is it so popular with, well, frankly, new drinkers?
Well, you have to think about the social aspect. Ordering a drink with a name like that, it's not just about the drink itself. It's about sparking a reaction.
Oh, totally. It's a whole thing.
Exactly. It's like a dare, a little rebellion, especially in places like college bars, where, let's face it, pushing boundaries is part of the experience.
So the name itself is like a social lubricant.
Exactly. It breaks the ice, gets people laughing, and suddenly it's not just a shot, it's a shared experience.
I see. So it's like the name gives you permission to let loose a little. Interesting. Okay, but what about the actual drink? I mean, we know there's peach schnapps involved.
And that's where the real fun begins.
Right. Because after the peach schnapps, it's anyone's guess. It's like the recipe equivalent of the Wild West out there. We found vodka and cranberry juice. That seems pretty standard. But I also saw some with lime, others with coconut rum, even pineapple juice.
And that's what makes it so interesting, right? You've got this drink with a, shall we say, memorable name, but the recipe is like a blank canvas.
So what you're saying is the wet pussy's real legacy is letting bartenders do whatever they want.
Well, not exactly. It's more like each variation, each tweak to the recipe, it tells us something about where and when that drink was made.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Like maybe pineapple juice was all the rage in a certain decade, or coconut rum was the cheapest thing at the bar back in the day, so boom, instant wet pussy variation.
It's like a snapshot of drinking history in a glass. Speaking of history, I did notice something while we were digging through all these recipes. You know the woo-woo cocktail?
Vodka, peach schnapps, and cranberry juice, right?
Yeah. A few of these wet pussy recipes look awfully similar. Think they could be related somehow.
It's not impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. There is some overlap there, especially with the whole peach schnapps and cranberry thing.
So maybe one influenced the other?
Or maybe they both came from some even older drink. Who knows? But it's fun to think about, right? Tracing the family tree of cocktails.
Totally. Although I think we're all glad some cocktail names got lost to history. Am I right? But, okay, let's be real here for a second. We can't talk about the wet pussy without talking about the elephant in the room, or, well, the name in the cocktail glass, I guess.
You mean the name that shall not be repeated?
The one and only. Do you think that's the real reason this drink is so popular? Just the shock value?
I mean, it definitely grabs your attention, right? You're not going to forget a name like that anytime soon.
True. But I gotta think there's more to it than that. If the drink itself was terrible, no one would order it, right?
Exactly. Which brings us to the fascinating world of flavor profiles.
Oh, here we go. Get your lab coats on, everybody.
Very funny. But seriously, even with all those crazy variations, most wet pussy recipes fall into a specific flavor profile. Fruity, sweet, maybe a little tart. It's not exactly challenging your palate, you know?
It's like the gateway shot for people who are new to cocktails, right? It's something familiar, nothing too out there.
Exactly. Which is probably why it's such a hit with the younger crowd, those just starting to explore the world of mixed drinks. It's approachable, you know?
So we've got a drink with a provocative name, a recipe that's about as consistent as, well, I don't even know. And yet it's insanely popular in certain circles. It's like a weird, boozy mystery, isn't it?
And we're going to try to solve it. Or at least die trying.
Preferably after the deep dive is over. All right, but before we solve anything, I want to throw something out there, kind of a big picture thought.
Okay.
So hear me out on this. We've got this drink, the wet pussy, right? And it's got this super suggestive name, obviously. But then there's this whole other layer where the recipe is basically anyone's guess. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure cocktail.
I'm kind of seeing where you're going with this.
Right. So I'm thinking, what if this drink as weird as it sounds, is like a modern-day folktale.
Okay, I like that. Tell me more.
Well, think about it. Like traditional folk tales, they get passed down through generations. But every time someone tells the story, they add their own little spin. They tweak it, change it up a bit. Could the wet pussy be like the cocktail version of that?
It's an interesting analogy. You've got those core elements that everyone knows, the name, the peach schnapps, but then everything else is up for grabs. And like you said, each variation tells us a little something about the time and place it came from.
Right. Like a boozy time capsule.
Yeah.
And think about where this drink is popular. College towns, bachelorette parties, those are all about shared experiences, right?
Absolutely. Those are places where traditions are made and passed along. And having a drink that everyone knows, even if they make it a little differently, it's like an instant connection.
Exactly. It's like that inside joke, that shared understanding that you're all in on. And let's be real, the name itself, it sparks conversation. It's memorable, for better or worse, and people have definitely spent their fair share of time debating its origins, its merits, all of it.
It's definitely sparked a few debates in our time.
No kidding. But the point is, the wet pussy, it's more than just a drink at this point. It's got this whole cultural story to tell. And yeah, maybe it's a little silly, a little scandalous, but isn't that kind of the point? Sometimes the best stories are.
I'll drink to that.
And there you have it, folks. Another deep dive in the books. We hope you've enjoyed this, let's call it an eye-opening exploration of the wet pussy shot.
Cheers to that.
Cheers. And remember, the next time you're faced with a drink menu, don't be afraid to dig a little deeper, ask some questions. You never know what kind of stories you might uncover. Until next time, happy drinking.
Mix it up. Grab all the recipes from the description or swing by drinklab.org. Cheers.